Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the story of an Indian, I suppose you call him a business guy, who migrated to Australia and arrived with that very entitled Indian attitude that you see pretty much with all the migrants that are coming along. But this guy had a difference. He had heard about how Indians can get jobs through the affirmative action network, and they can come and work for Indian front companies or Indian labour hire firms. He was aware of all that, and so, but he said no. You know, he fancied himself as a bit of a kick-ass dude and in business, and so he was going to get a job, and he was going to go and apply for jobs that outside of the affirmative action network. So he was going to get hired on merit alone, and all credit to him for thinking along those lines. Now his thinking was deeply flawed, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But his decision was that he was going to not rely on any affirmative action or any handouts, and he'd done a bit of research, I suppose, that he knew he could get a job in the government any time, the Australian government. He knew that bullshit jobs would just be fantasy jobs, would be created for him, and he could just walk into one of those. He knew that. He also knew that there were companies that were businesses that aren't really business anymore. They're kind of extensions of the deep state government, businesses that rely either primarily or wholly on government contracts. And he knows that those companies are under a lot of pressure to hire Indians under affirmative action programs and so on. So he's aware of that, and but he's not going to participate in that. He's going to show what a kick-ass dude he is by getting hired on merit alone. So let's come back to meritorious. Now, I don't think, talking to the guy, I think he got, he's he's not Brahmin, but he's upper class, probably the upper end of the class, just below the Brahmins, and I can't think of the name on the top of my head, but he's upper echelon socially, so he's got that sense of entitlement that class of people have, and also that what would you call it? That philosophical, sort of Socratic philosophical sort of way of talking and looking at things, which is always pleasant. I always enjoy talking to people like that. So, be they Indians or anyone else for that matter. But it doesn't mean they're any good as employees or for doing work or getting the job done. And certainly I've been always disappointed in hiring Indians and working with them. They've always been sub-quality in my view. Now, this guy, he's worked at an organisation in India which is part of a monopoly, a district sort of monopoly, where effectively, his family is influential and they get in. So he doesn't really have to attend an interview. So he gets the job and he doesn't really have to do any work. He just has to swan around looking important and wearing a sharp suit. And he's an upper class guy, his pronouncements, given they're surrounded by flunkies and peasants to do the donkey work, his pronouncements are treated as the equivalent of an utterance from God. And so he's got this view of the world and his place in it. Why somebody like that would want to come to the West, I don't know. But it's almost like he's got an attitude of conquest. He's been regaled with stories in Indian schools about how the white people colonized and raped India. So now it's our turn to go to the white people's countries and take back what they stole from us. And, those type of quite emotional but non-factual stories that the kids applied with. So going to the white countries, an all-conquering hero, is kind of something that he sort of dreamed of from his youth. So he comes to Australia. He's not going to take any handouts or affirmative action, but he's not really got any skills. His degree, I would suspect, was bribed and paid for. It's treated, the university is treated as a social scene where the Indian upper classes mingle to find future wives and husbands and party and all that sort of thing. Definitely not there to hit the books. Although Indians are pretty good at swatting, by the way. So as the Japanese and Chinese are. So it's not beyond their capability, but they don't have to. You just bribe somebody, you've got your PhD. So he's got no business skills. He's got no real work experience. He attended a place where he was treated as a demigod and swanned around, but he's got no actual business skills. Sure, he's memorized some proverbs and so on to give, and he's got that Socratic, chatty sort of bourgeois type of patter, which gives the impression and it suggests the confidence and the self-assurance that somebody from the decision-making class comes from. And decision-making they may be, but they're never accountable. They can fuck up anything they want, but because they've got monopolies and can be protected by their class and the government and so on, they don't have to do any work. So anyway, he comes to Australia, the all-conquering hero. He's not going to do the affirmative action thing and finds that he actually can't get a job. His qualifications actually don't mean anything when he's required to compete for his job with people who he considers to be his social inferiors, by the way. But if he's required to compete for a job in a merit-based situation, he doesn't even make he doesn't even get a fucking interview. So as he's boohooing into his coffee cup, he's saying, "Look, I've applied for over 100 jobs and haven't got a fucking interview." And he's got so frustrated, distraught by and he's now convinced it's racism. What else can it be? Can it be that he's underqualified? He actually doesn't have any qualifications, that all his qualifications and capacities he thinks he's got are in his imagination as an upper class Indian who's never been made accountable for anything he does and has never actually done a day of work. And that's obvious when you talk to him. Once you get away from his little philosophical Socratic type of patter, you realise that the guy knows nothing. He's effectively still a kid at high school. He's got no qualifications. He's got no credentials. He's got he's been working for years, but again, as a demigod, not as an actual person doing things, producing things, creating things, or being accountable. And he's worked in a district monopoly where they don't have to lift a finger to get business through the door. The business comes to them because the customer's got nowhere else to go. He doesn't see that, by the way. His perception is he can't comprehend that a monopoly just delivers customers into his front door, into the business's front door. To him, well, they must be doing it right because we've got a turnover of many millions, so we must be a viable, real commercial business. Well, no, you're not, because the customer has nowhere else to go. So if you take 6 months to deliver it, or you overcharge them, or give sloppy service, or fuck up an installation, or this or that, the customer's got nothing they can do. There's nowhere to go. And given that the people that you're treating like shit are a lower class, they're not allowed to complain anyway for social reasons. So this is something. So he comes in with this insane overestimation of his abilities. And this idea that he could compete on merit like he could compete on, he can't. And again, it's shown that he can't even get a fucking interview. So just out of exasperation, he would actually go knocking on doors, like he would go into the business, knock on the door, and say, "Hello, my name is Sanji, and I've applied for a job, and I want to." And he does the whole thing. He goes there, the thick Indian accent and everything. And so he goes there, and he says that he shames them into giving him an interview, and then they tell him, "Look, you're not up to it, buddy." He doesn't get the interview is sort of brief and doesn't go any further. He's now gone full circle. He said, "Well, but I'm a brilliant genius. I'm like, wow, I'm entitled to a prestigious, well-paying job, as I would be in India. So therefore I should be. These people in Australia, these white people, they're my social inferiors. They've got no right to interview me and tell me what job I can and can't. So he goes on like this, and eventually gives up and decides that he's being defeated not by his lack of skills, not by his lack of or his insane overestimation of his ability. He's not being defeated by any of that. He's being, racism is the issue. These white people are oppressing him and putting him down and not recognizing his greatness as they should. and not bowing down before him again, as they should. And therefore, he has to accept affirmative action, not because he wants to, because he needs to, because his greatness is unblemished, but because of this evil racism, because that can be the only reason why he's not swanning, strolling into a well-paid, prestigious job in a country that is only recently arrived in. But it's interesting. What's interesting is listening to him explain it. Like so many Indians, he believes because he can bribe and because he's monopolies and family connections, he's never had to compete for anything in his life, whether it be a customer, a job, or a qualification or a credential. Never had to. But he thinks that scenario is a natural one. That why should he have to do anything? It has all come naturally. It's just all fallen off out of a tree right into his lap, and he thinks that is the natural order of the world, and that it can be replicated when he comes to a white country where merit plays an ever decreasing role, by the way, but plays a much greater role than it does in the social and business circles that he moves in India. But it's interesting watching that transformation. Like many Indians, or a number of them, certainly ones I've come across, they believe affirmative action is them fighting back against racism, and so they have a double sort of annoyance or axe to grind, if you will. On one hand, they're demigods who should be able to have any job they want, and they're denied that. That's because of racism, and then they have to go through somewhat a humiliation, as they would see it, in accepting an affirmative action job, because that means that their greatness hasn't been appreciated and it should be. So they have to accept this affirmative action, which is in an indirect way a form of degradation, and they're quite they see that with some considerable annoyance. But it's interesting watching this guy go through that loop. And go through that journey of thinking, he's a low quality employee, no matter how you look at it, no matter how sharp the suit is, or how many Socratic proverbs he utters. But he doesn't see it that way, and so it's interesting watching him go full circle, where now he's fully embraced affirmative action and has got an affirmative action job that again, had it been a competitive hiring process, he could never have dreamed of getting. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.